Last summer, I had a very bad night after eating halibut fajitas. I am having a great evening out with friends, tasty cocktails, vivacious conversation, yummy food, when suddenly I notice my stomach is a little off. I make a hasty departure, fortunately, managing to get home before I revisit my meal. Afterward, sitting on the bathroom floor feeling gross and spent, I nonetheless have the wherewithal to text my friend to please inform the restaurant that the halibut fajitas had made me sick. I am a good citizen and do not want them serving bad halibut to other guests. The next morning, I'm still not feeling 100%, and I'm like, damn you, halibut fajitas. I'm talking to my friend Lori, who wasn't at last night's dinner, and I attribute my grumpiness to food poisoning. Lori's initial empathy is cut with a question. Are you sure it's food poisoning? Could it be something else, like appendicitis? It's not appendicitis. It was the halibut fajitas. It's just so obvious. I can't believe she's disputing my diagnosis. I stew in silence, thinking, Lori is such a worrier. But then I wonder and ask quietly, what are the symptoms of appendicitis? Pain on the lower side of your abdomen. Oh, well, that's not what it feels like. The pain is right in the middle of my stomach. I feel vindicated that I can so easily reject her silly appendicitis theory. Moving around is painful, so I stay in bed all day, tending to my stomach ache and cursing the halibut fajitas. The next morning I wake up early and I notice a change. I still have pain in my stomach, but overnight it moved to the lower right side of my abdomen, where my appendix is. Could it be? Might I have been wrong about the food poisoning? Could this abdominal pain be appendicitis? I will spare you the details of my trip to urgent care, who sent me to the ER, who pumped me full of antibiotics just in case my appendix burst before the surgery, which successfully removed my appendix, which my doctor described as angry, which translates to on the verge of bursting, but it did not, saving me the potentially life-threatening spread of infection throughout my abdomen. Don't worry, I'm fine. I was fortunate, albeit a little foolish. I had no reason to think I was being foolish. Food poisoning was not only a plausible explanation for the pain, it was the most likely one. Most people get appendicitis between the ages of 10 and 30. I was 55. I had stats on my side. Plus, the pain was in the middle of my belly, not on the side. And come on, I had just eaten halibut fajitas. Food poisoning was the obvious culprit. It just wasn't the correct one. In the end, I was wrong. Lori was right. She's the hero of the story. I'm the idiot who could have died because I was so sure I was right, because I wasn't willing to consider a different perspective. What is my problem? Well, it turns out it's the same problem we all have. We humans have cognitive biases, flaws in our perceptions and interpretations that distort reality. Confirmation bias is the one that steers us to focus on information that supports what we already believe to be true and avoid or dismiss information that contrasts with our existing beliefs. This bias narrows our view by focusing our efforts on supporting our position, and a single perspective is limiting. Confirmation bias seized on the fact that I didn't have the one symptom of appendicitis I had heard of. A quick Google search would have revealed that I had all the other symptoms. As a society, our awareness of confirmation bias has increased over the past few years. As we've come to recognize our political bubbles, Awareness of confirmation bias helps us to make sense of people whose views are anathema to our own, how someone can buy into QAnon, how people can think that we should defund the police. There's a more widespread awareness of the impact of confirmation bias on other people, but it's so much harder to see it in ourselves. The same people who rant against the biased news that's influencing those idiots on the other side are convinced that their own news source is providing them with complete and accurate coverage. They're convinced that their outlook is the correct one. As humans, we are loath to acknowledge that our perspectives may not be fully informed. Here's the irony. I am a psychologist. I wrote a book about listening. Sorry. I teach about listening. I wrote a book about how to have dialogue across political disagreement, how to embrace multiple perspectives. And yet, here I am confessing to you that when put to the test, I failed. I focused only on information that supported my belief that I had food poisoning and dismissed even the suggestion of an alternative explanation. I fell victim to the same barriers and biases I caution others to avoid. The unexpected benefit of my experience with appendicitis is that it offered some insight into how we can broaden our view beyond our bubbles. For example, my encounter with appendicitis shed some light on what happens when we act on our beliefs. As hard as it is to change our inner thoughts, it's even more difficult to back down when we've expressed our convictions forcefully or otherwise behaved in ways that are consistent with our beliefs. Not only had I barked at Lori and excused myself from dinner due to food poisoning, I had conveyed the information to the restaurant, who, for all I know, had thrown out their entire supply of halibut based on my accusation. Side note, I did call the restaurant from the ER to tell them that I was wrong, and they were very nice about it. It turns out, taking a stand puts us in a mindset that's resistant to change. So the more we voice or vote our political opinions, the greater our unconscious motivation to stick to them. Whereas we are very adept at persuading ourselves, we are likely to resist other people's attempts to change our minds. Due to another cognitive bias, naive realism, we believe that our own interpretations are objective and logical, whereas we think others' interpretations are skewed by emotion, ideology, and self-interest. So when we encounter someone whose position is in conflict with information we've been exposed to, we not only see them as uninformed, we also see them as irrational zealots, which makes it easy to dismiss them. Remember how I saw Lori's concern as a character flaw? Insulated in political silos, we experience conflict with families and community. These social divisions are due in part to ideological polarization, different views about the issues. Even more so, they are fueled by affective polarization, the contempt we feel toward people who have those different beliefs about the issues. These days, affective polarization is on the rise. We are increasingly geographically isolated, and over 60% of partisans do not want family members marrying across party lines, more than double the number who felt that way in the 1950s. Why do we distance ourselves from each other? Because not only do we dismiss information that's not consistent with our beliefs due to confirmation bias, we dismiss people who hold those other beliefs due to naive realism. Moreover, perhaps the most divisive bias, motive attribution asymmetry, leads us to see our own motivations as benevolent and theirs as hostile, even hateful. This can feel very satisfying because not only does it maintain your conviction that you are right, it fosters a sense of moral superiority. You are not only correct in your view, you are a smart and good person, in contrast to the heartless, ignorant, and unprincipled people on the other side. To consider a different perspective as valid may threaten your denigration of your opponents and consequently your elevation of yourself. And it's so easy to maintain these malevolent impressions of the other side as we gather with like-minded folks and collectively lament the shortcomings of our adversaries. We think that disparaging another person's beliefs maintains our superiority, and yet, by limiting our view to only a perspective that we already agree with, we limit our ability to achieve our goals. When I ask people what makes them want to connect across the political divide, reliably, this is what I hear. Many say, there's someone I want to maintain a relationship with in my life, and I'm having trouble doing that due to political conflict. Some want to heal the divide or find common ground. Others are hoping to persuade or convince someone. And some say, I simply cannot understand how people can think or act or vote as they do. These are the motivations we have for bridging the divide. And it turns out, to accomplish any of these aspirations, we need to understand a perspective other than our own. A single perspective is limiting. If we're open to multiple perspectives, we will understand the issues better, we will understand other people better, and we will have a better chance of achieving our goal, whether that is to convince someone, make an informed voting choice, or avoid a ruptured appendix. So how can we help people be more open to multiple perspectives in a political conversation? Well, let's look at what would have helped me be open to an alternative explanation to halibut fajitas. Curiosity is a great foundation. I got a little bit curious when I asked about the symptoms of appendicitis, but what if I got even more interested? What if I queried, why do you ask? Lori might have had more to offer. What if I had asked Siri? She seems very knowledgeable. When confronted with information that contradicts what you believe, get curious. Seek multiple angles on the issue, or try to understand why other people believe what they do. It's easier to be open to new information when we feel safe and calm, not when we're physically riled up or beaten down. You know, like when your appendix is kicking up a storm inside your abdomen. When we sense a threat, our bodies respond as if we are in physical peril, even if the danger is only a confrontation with our ideas. We can regain our equilibrium by calming our bodies. Try taking a few slow, deep breaths in order to lower your blood pressure and raise your receptivity to new information. When you want to offer an alternative perspective, be respectful. Lori didn't keep pushing after I rejected her theory. She was patient. the more we make someone justify their view, the more likely they are to persist with their belief. By articulating their case, they end up becoming more attached to their argument, which makes it harder to shift their view. So rather than challenging someone to defend their opinion, encourage them to elaborate about the meaning that the issue holds for them. Similarly, when you want to communicate your view, share stories rather than stats and slogans. Slogans are helpful as rallying cries for those who are already in agreement, but they do little to promote understanding. A back and forth of Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter doesn't move the conversation forward. Imagine if Lori had lobbed a slogan at me, "Appendicitis, what a crisis!" And I had countered with a chant, "Halibut fajitas, careful if you eat us." Not a very effective conversation. Instead, share stories about how you came to your view. What if Lori had said, "A few years ago, I had abdominal pain, and it turned out to be appendicitis"? That might have gotten my attention without activating my defenses. Something I really appreciate about Lori is that when she dropped me off at the hospital and picked me up again the next day, and ever since then, she has never said, "I told you so." Her kindness helps me to be more open to her input. In political conversations, lean into grace. Never gloat when your candidate wins or when the tragedy you predicted comes to pass. Being educated does not protect us from confirmation bias, not even being well informed about psychological theory. So, what is the antidote to confirmation bias? It's called intellectual humility. Intellectual humility involves being respectful of and curious about a perspective different from your own. People high in intellectual humility tend to be more flexible, comfortable with ambiguity, and willing to learn about new perspectives. They're not so attached to being right. Intellectual humility doesn't compel you to reject your own beliefs and adopt new ones. It turns out you can be respectful of and curious about another position even when you hold deeply held convictions and beliefs. A single perspective is limiting. But when calm curiosity encounters an open-hearted storyteller, we have the best chance of overcoming confirmation bias, of understanding a different perspective, even if we don't agree with it. And if we, equipped with this broader view, we can bridge the political divide to accomplish our goals, to make a more persuasive argument, to find areas of agreement, to heal a ruptured relationship. And if we can do all that, we will strengthen our individual competencies, our families, our communities, and our country. And maybe, just maybe, we might even be able to eat halibut fajitas again. Thank you.